Hi, everyone. Welcome to MisinfoDay. MisinfoDay is hosted by the University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public in partnership with the Washington State University Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. I'm Liz Krause, MisinfoDay planner at the Center for an Informed Public, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you today as we learn to resist misinformation and how to be better informed. Before we start, I want to show you where we're all tuning in from today. We're here with students, teachers, and librarians from across Washington State and the United States, and we even have some people tuning in internationally. So thank you all for being here. This session is Understanding the Landscape of Information Disorder with Jacqueline Mason. Jacqueline is a senior investigative researcher at First Draft News, who focuses on mis and disinformation in Black and Latinx communities. There will be some time at the end of the session to answer your questions. So if you have any questions for Jacqueline at any point during the session, you can use the Q&A form that is linked in the description box below to submit those. That's all from me. I'll pass it off to Jacqueline.
Thank you, Liz. Welcome, everyone. As Liz has said, this session is called Understanding the Landscape of Information Disorder. Now, you may not have heard the terms information disorder before, right? You might have heard misinformation, disinformation, fake news, which we don't like to use, and I will get into that in a second. But let's get into it. So yes, my name is Jacqueline Mason. I'm Senior Investigative Researcher and Special Project Manager at First Draft. And First Draft, we work to empower people with knowledge, understanding, and the tools to build resilience against misleading misinformation and disinformation. So we are a global nonprofit who works to fight information disorder online. We're based in the US, but also in Europe and in the APAC region. And from misleading narratives to conspiracy theories, the complexity and scale of information pollution in today's digital and divided world, work presents an unprecedented challenge. So basically our relationship to information is emotional, right? And at First Draft, we talk a lot about emotional skepticism. You see something online. Does it make you angry, happy, upset? Does it make you want to buy something? This is emotional, right? And so when we see sometimes misinformation, malinformation, we get upset and we have the urge to share. So what we really suggest that you do if you come across misinformation is to stop, breathe, take a pause, and see if what you are sharing is accurate. And this is just a little meme. I'm sure you've seen memes, and we'll talk a little bit about those later. So basically, this neuroscience of fake news, and it basically says highly emotionally provocative information stands a much stronger chance of lingering in our minds and being incorporated in our long-term memory banks. So basically the first job of mis and disinformation is to catch our attention, right? And stay in our memory. And for that reason, novelty or being something new that we've never heard of is very key. Information disorder is not about the facts, right? We look at a lot of COVID-19 misinformation, right? This is an example of a cure, right? It's something someone might want to believe, but it's not fact-based. And some people spread this information willingly or unwillingly. So feeling powerless and vulnerable make us more susceptible to mis and disinformation. So now I want to break down the differences between misinformation and disinformation. So misinformation is when people share disinformation, but they don't realize it's false or misleading, often because they're trying to help. Like the slide that I just showed you here, that is disinformation, right? But someone that one of your loved ones, one of your friends could really share that as a cure for COVID-19 because someone in their family has it and they're trying to help, and maybe they don't have access to vaccine or, ability to go to the hospital, right? So they will share these things that are harmful, but not meaning to, right? So why? Out of fear, to protect people, or just in case to display their identities? Now, disinformation is when people intentionally create false or misleading information. And this could be to make money, have political influence, or just to cause trouble or harm, right? And we say why? Money, political gain, or to sow distrust. So fake news, I just said this in the beginning, this is a term we should avoid using, and I will tell you why. Fake news is much too restrictive, right? We have memes, we have videos, we have numerous posts across social media, website, and podcasts. These things aren't all fake, right? They may be inaccurate on some level or misleading, but not fake, right? So it's too binary. Most content's not fake or real. It exists in these shades of gray. And it really targets the media. The term fake news was developed, 4, 5 to 6 years ago and used by politicians and figures to really discredit journalists and the media. So there's 7, at First Draft, we've identified about 7 types of mis and disinformation, right? And we scale them from low to high. So the first would be satire or parody. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with sites like The Onion. There's also sites called the Babylon Bee, right? And it doesn't have intention to cause harm, but it can out of context. There's false connection. So that's when headlines or visuals or captions do not support the content that is below. There's misleading content. That's the use of information to frame an issue or individual. False content, and that's when genuine content is shared with false contextual information. Imposter content, when genuine sources are impersonated. Manipulated content, when genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive. And fabricated content. And this is 100% false, right? And it's intentionally made by disinformation agents to deceive or harm. And so we're scaling this from low to high, and I will show you guys a couple examples of these types of misinformation. So first, like I said, we have satire. A lot of us are familiar with The Onion, but they will write articles that are humorous, but that sound very close to the truth, could be a true article. When we share these kind of things out of context or even in context, when some people aren't familiar with a publication such as The Onion, this can turn into misinformation, right? Because people believe it to be true. So this is still, a non-intentional, but still, a harmful form of information disorder. We also have false connection, right? Does drinking alcohol prevent coronavirus? Absolutely not. But this was a real article. So information disorder, false context. Okay, this is a McDonald's that has been set on fire. This happened a few years ago, but it was posted at the time of the anti-police brutality protests after the killing of George Floyd. And it was put on to Twitter as it had happened in that time. In reality, it had happened a couple years ago, right? So this is false context. This image is a real image, but it did not happen at this time. We have imposter content. So this is a screenshot from when Joe Biden was actually running for president. You could make your own kind of flyer avatar, right? Someone co-opted it and said, voter fraud, mail-in ballots, I'm on Team Joe. And many people believe this actually came from the Biden website. And as we know, on January 6th at the insurrection at the Capitol, a lot of that movement and that momentum was based on a unfounded idea of voter fraud, right? So this is something that circulated a couple months before any of that happened, right? So you look at how imposter content also circulates online. So this is manipulated content. As you can see, there's a picture from Getty Images, and then to the right, we have a superimposed person who is holding a gun, and this is in Seattle at an autonomous zone, right? And this picture, as fake as you might think it is, or maybe not, this picture was actually run in the media, right? So they had to issue a retraction and apologize. So sometimes these manipulated images actually make their way into mainstream media. And there's fabricated content. So I will use an example from like the left and the right. During the Texas blackouts, there was a tweet that was going around that purported to be from Ted Cruz. I'll believe in climate change when Texas freezes over. This is not a real tweet. This was made using some sort of kind of Photoshop tweet. There's a lot of different websites around where you can make your own tweets, but it was, as you can see by the engagement at the bottom, reshared a lot. The same with what's happening on the right with AOC. Someone who's running in government actually posted another fake tweet, which claims that she wants to keep the government closed, right? So this is fabricated content. And they're just general tactics, right? Memes. A lot of misinformation has a kernel of truth, using different hashtags, screenshots, and keyword squatting, which we'll talk about those things. Amplification is one of the biggest things, right? How something can get blown out of proportion to like a number of variables. And like the types of places where disinformation thrive as well, right? Looking at closed messaging apps. Some people, depending on where you're from, WhatsApp is extremely popular. There's a lot of COVID mis and disinformation that will come on these private groups, Facebook chats as well, Instagram groups, right? This is where mis and disinformation can also thrive. And we can't see it, unfortunately, because these are private groups. So people could be talking about something that's inaccurate. You would never know. So it's very important that you are sure where this information comes from if you use any of these private groups. There's keyword squatting, which is a term that was coined by Joan Donovan at Harvard and Brian Friedman. It's the strategic domination of keywords to misrepresent groups, individuals, or information. Okay, and we have the Save the Children narrative, which was co-opted by QAnon, right? People might want to search something that Save the Children sounds very innocent, but then when you're searching this hashtag, you end up seeing just rampant mis and disinformation. So it's important to know that that can happen, especially on platforms like Twitter, where they still have a trending topics. Hate speech and disinfo, which is very, very unfortunate. This is a big problem on social media. It's up to the platforms to kind of moderate this type of thing. It's still very pervasive, but it's something to watch out for. So understanding information disorder on emerging platforms is something interesting, right? The rise of TikTok, which is a very popular platform, and then also the rise of Clubhouse, which is an audio platform. These apps are relatively new, and moderating them can be fairly difficult, especially with Clubhouse, because it's an audio-based app, right? So you have to work overtime to see how this mis or disinformation is flowing, right? We can't use things like hashtags or images with Clubhouse, and TikTok is mostly, video based. So, be sure to watch out. Wherever there's information, doesn't matter if it's a new platform, there's the possibility of disinformation. Local groups and online spaces are something interesting too. People use message boards less, I feel, maybe young people even less, but they still thrive, right? And this is just an example. People go on different online communities to sell things, buy things, before COVID-19, to organize groups, right? But also information disorder, which can be pervasive anywhere, will find itself on these online spaces and communities. So it's important to watch out for these as well. And memes, I talked a little bit about memes and, how they can be carriers of mis and disinformation. They're very pervasive online, right? And it's very easy to spread. They can be funny, they're very visual, they can just be in a tight little package into which they can be distributed very quickly. So memes tend to move, insanely quickly across the internet. So it's important to watch out for exactly, what's being said, the messages that are flowing through these memes. And this is something might be a little advanced, but we talk about the trumpet of amplification. So sometimes things are on the anonymous web, somewhere deep and dark, where I hope that you would not go, and then move into closed networks. Then conspiracy theories communities, which, are rampant online, into mainstream social media, and then out to professional media, right? We really hope a lot of times that things do not get past the anonymous web, right? But when they do, something like QAnon that you may have heard of, this is something that started like deep in the anonymous web, right? And then it finally makes its way out to mainstream media. So this is how mis and disinformation can flow. And we really like to look at the role of platforms. And I, would love if everyone here examined that too, right? Some measures have been taken in order to, curb the spread, for platforms to curb the spread of mis and disinformation, but it's not enough, even it's still post-election, it's still thriving as far as COVID-19 mis and disinformation. So as we mentioned, I work with collectives on what we call racialized disinformation, and that is any sort of mis and disinformation that has to do with race, particularly in Black and Latinx communities. So I'm just going to give you all some examples of things that we're seeing and things to look out for. So I just want to say no screenshotting or tweeting, because when you take things like this out of context and then spread them across the internet, no one will know that you were at this, webinar learning all of these things. It just looks like it's mis and disinformation. So please do not. And first, I'm going to go over a couple of the themes that we saw during the 2020 election. So you may have heard of this and you may have not, but a few years ago, actually, when Kamala Harris was running for president, there was a, online campaign saying, Kamala Harris is not an American Black person, right? There are memes, as I said, and these spread extremely quickly, calling her Kamala Dolezal, saying that she is not African American, saying that she, is from India, right? Kind of, her heritage in question, much like we saw with Obama when he was, in the office, where we called it birtherism, and people were calling this birtherism 2.0. Then we start to see a lot, especially on Twitter, of different tweets proliferating with this same kind of talk, and kind of came out of nowhere. And other researchers noticed that it was very suspect behavior, new accounts with relatively low followers saying that Kamala Harris was not an American Black person. So this is another disinformation researcher named Carolyn Orr who brought that up. And like I showed you with the trumpet of amplification, it then went from kind of smaller accounts posting it to Donald Trump Jr. saying, is this true? Wow. And articles calling this a movement, or is this trolling? Because it just blew up at this point during her presidential run. Now, fast forward during to when she was asked to be vice president by President Joe Biden, we then have it coming up again, the exact same talk, saying, questioning her racial identity, xenophobia, racism, etc. Some of it was flagged by the platforms. As you can see, it's been declared false information here, but that did take some time. And we can see at the bottom how much engagement this got on Facebook. This was also on some radio shows and reposted on Twitter and across social media. So we're also getting that audio component. Same thing, kind of taking pictures of her family out of context, all just talking about the heritage. So we're getting that same disinformation campaign that happened a couple of years ago back, and using this hashtag, never Biden, never Kamala. This is another thing. It wasn't just racial identity. It also talked a lot about her past as a prosecutor. This meme was extremely popular, which says, beautiful mosaic of Kamala made of all the men she locked up and kept in prison, right? This proliferated across social media. We took a closer look at this, and we could see that this just repeated the same image about, I think, 15 times. So this isn't true at all, but this is an effective way to spread mis and disinformation about her past as a prosecutor. And moving on to different types of mis and disinformation and how we got to the point with mail-in ballots, right? Everything that happened with voter fraud and those claims that were proven to be untrue. Early in the mail-in voting process, people were taking pictures claiming that the USPS was carting mailboxes off and taking them away, when this wasn't true. These were regularly scheduled reinstallments of old mailboxes. This is a place to the left where mailboxes just were like living, kind of like not a junkyard, but like a storage facility, but using this image to really scare people into the voting process. Same here. It basically shows that this mailbox is locked. Now, this mailbox was not locked. On the other side, you could actually safely deposit mail. It was being picked up. This side was locked to prevent mail theft, because mail theft had been a problem. And to the right, you will just see some regular misinformation. It says how to vote by mail. Now, the problem here is how to vote by mail varies from state to state. So if I'm in New Jersey, then voting in California or Arkansas will be very different, right? So this is more misinformation. These people are trying to help people vote by mail, but you have to be careful because mail-in voting varied from state to state. And this was really difficult because as a person who studies Black and Latinx mis and disinformation, Black and Latinx people were the most likely to have their mail-in ballots rejected, right? So sowing these kinds of like fear and distrust in the mail-in voting system really could and we believe did have some consequences. So now I'm going to get a little bit into COVID-19 disinformation, especially in the Black community and what we've been seeing. So since COVID basically was declared a pandemic last March, we were seeing people saying that COVID was an intentional attack on the Black community, right? Maybe that it had something to do with depopulation, kind of blaming maybe the powers that be, billionaires and such, or government figures for the spread of COVID-19. So this is some things for almost a year ago. Then we started to see vaccine trials and how people reacted to them, right? And so you see this here where it says we're not going to be researched on. This was a real rally in Newark, New Jersey, and a protest. But yes, they were starting some vaccine trials, but people tried to tie historical legacies to vaccine trials. And I'll get into that. I'm not sure how many of you know about the historical legacy, which is the Tuskegee experiment. It's a real trauma against Black people in US history, where Black people were not injected with anything. That sometimes goes around. However, they were not treated for syphilis, right? And many people died, and many people had lasting injuries throughout their lifetime. But now this is used by some disinformation agents to say, not another Tuskegee experiment. In 2020, you still want a vaccine shot after they tested on us. Now, the problem, as I said in the beginning, is that in every part of misinformation, there is a kernel of truth. So yes, African Americans and Latinx people do have a tumultuous history, right, with being tested on by the American medical system. However, it's being distorted through a lot of these bad actors who are, spreading disinformation online. Another thing that happens often is attaching death or injury of celebrities to the vaccine, right? And so we have three popular Black personas who have taken this vaccine. Hank Aaron, most notably, who was a baseball player, a famous baseball player. He died shortly after he took his vaccine, unrelated. He died of natural causes. However, this death was attributed by many bad actors and disinformation agents to the vaccine. It's been declared missing context. This is untrue. However, it is spread. The same thing with Reverend Jesse Jackson. He also took the vaccine, but had to have just a routine surgery that was unrelated, still attaching that to celebrities, as well as Tyler Perry, who has been accused of taking the shot for various reasons, including for profit. But just watch out when and into public figures as well. So attaching any sort of acceptance of vaccines and trying to temper vaccine hesitancy by then saying that the public figure or the celebrity wants to depopulate the Black community or to harm the Black community in some way. So when you see things like that, think, why are they attaching this to a celebrity and why are they spreading this? Always second guess this kind of information if you see it online. And all this is super important because one, yes, we have historical legacies, but I really want to highlight that sometimes the media can go a little far with that, right? Like, yes, there are reasons why people of color would not want to take a vaccine, but a lot of Black people, overwhelmingly so, want to take a vaccine, right? You can see to the right, there's a huge turnout for a vaccine clinic, right? And then also to the left, you can see that there is a lack of access, right? A Black neighborhood in Alabama has yet to get one single vaccine. So let's think about access and let's think about other things when we think about Black people and vaccines. Like always second guess, why something may be happening. It's very important. So now here we are at immigration disinformation. So I'm just going to show you this picture. It says immigration police arresting people at voting booths. Now, this picture was put a lot of places. As we see, it was actually shared. These people are not being arrested for voter fraud, though, this says. Now, here's what happened. This picture is a composite, like I showed you earlier. We have these people in line to the left attempting to vote, and then we have someone being arrested by ICE to the right. And a tip-off could really be that, if someone was being arrested, wouldn't people look their direction? Wouldn't people be taking pictures on their phone? Everyone seems to be ignoring this kind of event, right? However, like the pictures I showed you earlier, this picture was still used by a publication. So it's important to be aware. And Now with immigration, there are some disinformation agents attempting to say there's a crisis at the border. And there's more kids in cages, and where's Hollywood, and blaming the Biden administration for various things, right? And they're using pictures from 1 to 2 to 3 years ago to prove their point, right? So for example, this picture to the left, which has over 7,000 shares, is actually from 2019 at a border patrol in Texas, right? So not current. Same thing here. We have another video that's from 2018 that is claiming to be just yesterday, right? We just are seeing these things over the week. So we'll talk more about how to verify images so you can actually see where something might have come from. This last one was actually spread by Mr. Weber, who is running for California governor, saying Biden's cages. I don't want to hear another sanctimonious word from the Democrats, right? And this was from a TikTok. And this TikTok has this caption calling these Biden storage containers, where's the outrage now? We ended up doing some investigating and visual verification, and we found that this video was from China, actually, when they were building a COVID tanks for, yes, in China. So this is not from America. This is not even current, I don't believe. And you just have to be able to like watch out for things like this and determine, is this real or not? And always second guess what you're looking at. So I'm going to do a couple of verification exercises with you all. And let's just start. So basically, I'm going to just show you a couple of images. This is of someone who had a very popular image. As you can see how many times it was shared, almost 200,000 shares of a wall which is being vandalized. It blames BLM protesters. Another picture of a rally in Missouri that claims that BLM showed up and attacked people. Another picture of BLM saying to Target, we're going to shut your business down. And then this from Trump 2020's Facebook, BLM protesters storm Rochester and climb on people's homes and trash businesses. Now, what all these pictures have in common is that the pictures are misleading, right? In the first, this memorial was vandalized, not by BLM, and it had been vandalized years before. From the second, if you look at other pictures, if you do a reverse image search, you will find that you see pictures of the entire incident between these two. And the man in the green shirt was actually antagonizing the other men, right? And with Rochester, we can see that from other images that people were actually invited onto these porches. They weren't climbing on people's porches. They were being supported by the people in Rochester. So it's important to, verify and look into imagery. So this is a tweet that we use for our simulations, right? And when we do simulations, we basically take a real world scenario and think about how we would respond, right, with different community leaders to mis and disinformation. So this is something that is fabricated, but I want to use it as an example. We basically had a young person who was beaten by 2 police officers in DC and assaulted on camera. And how this scenario would play out if we look into what kind of misinformation could potentially spread about this young person. So this is another fabricated by us intentionally article, right, from the Daily Caller. And it's saying this person, Kai Torres, was no angel. He attacked officers after being caught breaking into a car, right? So I'm suspicious of this picture. I'm suspicious of this whole thing, especially knowing the website, the Daily Caller, right? So I'm looking at this Reddit thread and I'm saying, I'm going to download this picture to my desktop. Then I'm going to use my trusty RevEye, which is a reverse image search, right? And you can download this as an extension. You right click on the photo and you would use reverse image search and do a search. You can search on all search engines, Google, Bing, Yandex, TinEye, etc. Upon a Google search, we see that this victim of Hamburg G20 riots. And then I can find, bingo, this actually happened in Germany. This did not happen in the US after I used my trusty visual search tools, right? And there's various tools. You may have seen some other workshops, but this is a very good one to use if you want to see if an image is actually from an actual event. Now, this is another thing that we came up with. Like, what if there were some sort of rap sheet that was going around about the person claiming that they had committed various crimes? What would we do? So we're looking at this rap sheet, and on Twitter, you can use advanced search and you can use actually just regular search bar. And we took some of the language from the rap sheet where it says count 27 to 30 guilty. Didn't find any results. However, then did a Google search, right? Now we see, here's a Twitter. Even though we didn't find it in the Twitter search bar, we definitely found it down here. But the tweet was actually suspended, right? So then there's another tool called the Wayback Machine. And sometimes the Wayback Machine actually, if someone archives something, you can then look at the archive. So we then implemented that into there, the tweet that was suspended, right? And then moving to archive.today, and then we were able to find it through a search after using various search tools, right? That we will share with you later. But yeah, there's a way of finding things, even if they have been archived, some things that have been deleted, we can still find. And so I think another important thing is sometimes that there is webcam, police cam footage, right? But that police camera footage only comes from one angle. And a lot of times there are other angles that, other people were at the event, other people might have taken video. How do we find that video and find those people? So we use these things at First Draft called Boolean queries, right? Or Boolean operators. And something that happens a lot when other people are witnesses, they use I was there, me or my or his, right? And you can use or to connect all of these words, right? And then you also search for Kai Torres, the person who was the victim, or Kai and police, right? It's important that, as you can see, these operators are in closed brackets until you'd like to say and, right? So you could search me, my, more, his, her, everything together, but then you must close that Boolean and then search for your other things. At that point, you'll be able to find, as we have, another angle of this video, right? So Boolean operators can really help you find things on various social media platforms. And also InVid, right? So you can actually, it does give you video verification, which is another great tool if you want to see if some metadata on videos and verifying videos as well. So that's going to be all. Thank you for your time, and we'll move on to the question portion.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. The first question that we have is, does discrimination, racial, gender, cultural, etc., and/or racism have a lot to do with false claim and/or accusations going viral and being spread?
Definitely. I mean, it's really up to what people might want to believe about a situation, right? If you are using a wedge issue such as race to spread hateful content, hate content, as many people unfortunately have done, we saw it with the last administration as far as think about COVID, right? And tying, cultures to COVID-19, right? And if you're getting someone worked up emotionally and they want to believe something about a certain, that's very xenophobic, and it's already been tied, by people in power, at politicians and professional people and people in media, then yes, I think that, race and will play a big part, and gender.
Thank you. Second question, do advertisers use misinformation to sell their products?
I think that sometimes they can use misleading information rather than, which also can be misinformation, right? Or intentionally might try to mislead. This is still harmful. And I do think that if you see someone that you follow spreading misinformation, I think that it's a good time to maybe do some verification and find out if what they're saying is real. I always notice that if you have like a hunch that something doesn't seem up in the up and up, it doesn't hurt to just look into it very quickly, right? And brands don't want to be called out in that way. So if you were like, I'm sorry, I don't know, I've identified that this is not true, right? I don't think that that's something that they really want in this age. So if you see something, I think say something.
Kind of going along with that, what do you suggest if you see friends or family sharing the misinformation?
Okay, this is a tough one because we love our friends and family. There was a recent article on BuzzFeed where someone really was very painful article talking about how their mother actually had gotten into QAnon. It was very hard to get her out. I would suggest that if you see your friends or family spreading mis or disinformation online, don't confront them in a public forum. Nobody wants to be embarrassed or humiliated. Usually at that point, people start to double down and then they'll retreat further into their kind of conspiratorial circles or content. I would say call them, text them. I just actually had an incident with a friend where I just reached out to her via phone and asked her, and we had a conversation about it. So try to do things that are more humane, right, in that respect. I also think that, I think that would be the best bet to prevent that.
Great, thanks. Just a second. Lost the question there. Is there any accountability in terms of tech platforms or individuals for falsifying information?
See, that's something that I think that is really being worked on post the election, right? Holding big tech accountable is very important. They've been making slight changes, like I showed you in some of the past slides, labeling things false information, putting health and science like CDC and WHO warnings below photos, but it's not enough, right? Because all of the disinformation that was proliferating before the election and all the COVID-19 misinformation is still on the platforms in a big way. And they're saying they're cracking down, but they're really not, right? And the only way to get these platforms to crack down is really to hold them accountable, right? So we really need to make sure we don't let up on, what is happening. And, right now with, what we work on with Black and Latinx communities, we really work on, inclusivity and tech equity. So yes, it's very important.
Do you think in terms of, obviously there's not one solution to fix the problem of mis and disinformation, but what are some of your these are like the top three things. Like, would that include the tech platforms? Does it include us? What are your top solutions in your opinion?
So my favorite solution thus far, I've worked with a collective of over 200 grassroots organizations called the Disinfo Defense League. And what we do as a team is work with different community-based organizations, right, and community leaders. So they can in turn understand Mr. Disinfo and then go work with the people they work with and develop programming for them, right? So it's kind of like an each one, teach one, train the trainer thing, right? So if you have interest in something like this and you can say, hey, you got caught up with this misinformation. Let me show you this really fun tool that really works for me. If I don't believe that a picture is real or if I want to verify something, right? And I just really think we're going to have to teach each other in order to eradicate mis and disinformation. And another thing is going to have to be, some sort of platform accountability. So those are the two major things.
Great, thank you. And you touched on this, but do you want to say more about any organizations fighting misinformation?
Yes, there is First Draft. We are fighting mis and disinformation. There is Avaz. They do a great job. There's also PEN America, works on some great disinformation projects. There's also many in the media at this point. Pretty much all the media outlets have a really dedicated disinformation journalist on their beat, reporter. At BuzzFeed, we have Jane. There's some great donies at CNN. There's all sorts of people really dedicated to this field and trying to fight mis and disinformation.
Great, good news.
Yes.
Last question. We talked about what happens if we see people sharing information. What if we are the person that has inadvertently, we shared this thing we thought was helpful, but then we realize it's false?
This is a great question because this happens all the time. And this even happens to us. Anything we share for work, obviously we're verifying and we're checking, but every once in a while, like I said, emotional skepticism won't happen because we want to believe it. A perfect example is that Ted Cruz tweet. Actually, some people, not at my company, but some people in other, within the sphere of people we work with shared that, and it was completely fake, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, sorry, oops, this actually was fabricated, because it's a very good job at being fabricated. It's not like, don't beat yourself up about it. I would say get rid of the post or edit the post and say, this was actually fake. This is actually the real story, a link to what really happened. There's no shame in it. Disinformation obviously is very well crafted these days. So just try to kind of, clear up and show the facts and move on.
All right. Thank you so much for your talk and for answering people's questions. Thank you to all of you who are tuning in. We hope that you were able to catch some of the other sessions we had today. If you weren't, the recordings of those and the recording of this session will be made available after the event. And we also have a toolkit that we'll be sharing that will have lessons and activities and some of the tools you saw today, those verification tools. This toolkit will include all of those things, so watch out for that. That's all we have, so thank you for joining us. Bye.